Welcome to the Coach Speak podcast, built for coaches, by coaches, hosted by Jamie Bolton and Dustin Martin, sponsored by Ray Crowther, providing athletic training equipment since 1932, helping you dominate with fundamentals.
Hey guys, welcome back to Coach Speak. It's Dustin Martin here with Jamie Bolton, and today we're getting into talking a little bit about building your brand. This episode is presented by Pro Quick Draw. They're a powerful platform that saves coaches a lot of time and enhances efficiency in building playbooks and installs. I know personally, I save 3 to 4 hours a day of work using Pro Quick Draw. What do you think, Bolton?
It is, yeah. I think for us, especially this time of year in the off season, is such a big part of what we do in terms of communicating with players and coaches and creating playbooks, playlists for players. You can give handouts. I actually used it at the clinics that I was speaking at, and they just look really clean. It's very professional. I'm proud to use their product. And you guys, if you guys are interested listening, they are offering a 14-day free trial, and you get kind of set up and connected with their team. They can kind of walk you through all the steps that you need to take. That link is in the show notes. If you click that link, get a 14-day free trial and kind of check it out.
You know, today we'll get started. We're going to talk about, building that coaching brand, but also not only building it, but let's talk about how we communicate that, because it's one thing to build it, but to also get it where people from the outside understand it, internally understand it. So, Bolton, tell us a little bit what you think a brand means in coaching.
Yeah, I think that term is thrown out a lot, what your brand is. And really, to me, that means what is your reputation as a coach? We talk about that a lot. I think about that constantly as a coach. We've had several roles. Me and you, Dustin, as like position coaches, coordinators, head coaches. And really the number one thing that sticks out to me is like reputation. What are you known for as a coach? And let's just kind of talk briefly about, what that looks like as a position coach. I think that's really, really important, especially somebody coming in new. We talked about in the previous episode, new roles, new challenges. I think the first thing you have to establish is, what is your reputation going to be? Yep. And I think what that really means is, how you do anything is how you do everything. I think that's a really good thing that I like to think about. How you do anything is how you do everything. And so the details and how you coach really manifests itself in the way that your players perform. And I think you have to be mindful of that. So as a position coach, Dustin, what do you think is like the number one or maybe the key qualities and behaviors that you want to have in your players or be known for as a coach?
Sure. Yeah. I think, when you look at it from a position coach standpoint, it's kind of like when you're a parent and you have a kid. Everything the kid does reflects you as a parent, whether you like it or not, good or bad. But like, that's kind of how it is as a position coach. When you get to group or team or game day, everything you do from the time you warm up to executing the goal to do, it reflects kind of on you. So if those minor details are hit on and they're perfect and it's really eye the catch, eye the tuck, things of that sort, then that reflects on you. However, if you don't hit those things and, receivers are fumbling the ball everywhere, like that's one thing where it's like, it just kind of shows, the minor details aren't really coached.
The number one thing that I look at, or I could see on film, especially in any position on the field, any sport, is your stance. I think
100%.
I think if you look at like, you're scouting a team or you're scouting yourself, you're like, man, our stances, are they good or bad? And then that for me, I'm like, they're either a really well coached team or they're not. They either pay attention to details or they don't.
Well, it's funny you talk about stance. Number one thing, being on the defense side of the ball, the first thing I look at when I'm scouting is the guy who's off the ball. How far back is he? Is his front foot on the receiver's back
foot? 1,000 yards deep?
Like and when he motions, is he at the same depth as the running back? Just things like that. But also that kind of leads into like, what is their spacing? Are they super tight just because their spacing's not any good, or are they concept based? Is their spacing changing per concept? So one thing I like to look at, soon as a team, say it's a home game, soon as a team arrives, I observe them from the time they hit campus to the time they warm up, because I think that also tells you a little bit about what their ultimate goal is that day. is it a business trip or is it a joking fest, a laugh fest?
Right.
And I think there's got to be a happy medium. You know, I grew up and our pregame meals in high school were 3:15 hit, you're dead silent till 7 o'clock. And then coaches wondering why you're flat. We've been in the library for 4 hours, you know? So I think you got to have a happy balance. I don't think you can be a joke fest, but like, they got to be comfortable because what I've learned is I've been on teams where you're dead silent and win and lose. I've been on teams where it is just crazy music, loud, joking, and you still win. You know what I mean? So it kind of, what does work best? But
yeah, and I think what you're saying too is like what I'm hearing is whatever you do, you should probably have a protocol and plan in place, and then it's like a ritual. So like for me, I definitely like silent dinners. So I'm definitely the opposite, right? Like I like everybody to kind of come in. We're gonna be silent. We're not gonna really have many devices out. I want you eating in silence. And for me, I always think about like preparing yourself for a really, really hard task. And I think you have to kind of settle yourself, but that's my personal thing, but that's what we do every time. If it's not like that, at least have it built into your thing, but whatever that may be. But your reputation would be they're structured and disciplined, and they're going to be kind of, structured down to the minute if that's what you want to do. And that's what I would like to be known for is someone that's structured and organized. And I think the kids respond to that.
Yep. No, I agree. I think my biggest thing is, Monday through Thursday, obviously we don't have a pregame meal, but before practice, I want to kind of simulate the same behavior that we do before. So, I don't expect a Monday through Thursday to come in the locker room and, be focused, whatnot, but I still expect that amount of focus at practice as if it were a game.
Right.
But like I said, I think you got to have a happy medium because
no one to flip the switch. Yeah.
Yes. Because I mean, like, don't get me wrong. When we come into pregame meal, it ain't joking and laughing, but there's small conversations and a lot of the kids, they have their headphones on. They're already focused. They're ready to go either way. Yeah. But I think the biggest thing is, and it's kind of like differentiating and teaching, you got to let everybody do what they need to do because you're going to have the players who want to talk. You're going to have the players who want to be to themselves. And we even have coaches like that. Like we have coaches that, they're standoff, they do their thing and they're getting their mind right. And then you got coaches who are cracking jokes the whole pregame,
You're kind of lighting the mood. I get it. No, I'm with you. But I think that going back to like that brand, that's such a big thing. And I think and now, kind of talking about your head coach is really the one that kind of sets that tone, whatever they want. And that's something that he may be known for. That's really good. Something else is with your brand is like leadership style. And I guess that kind of coincides with what we just talked about. It's like, what kind of leader do you want to be? I know you've talked about this a lot, transactional versus transformational. So I'm kind of jumping on like what you talk about a lot, but kind of, you want to think about the style of leader you are, because those communications and those times where you're communicating with players or parents or admin, whatever that may be, or even if you're a position coach in your position group, the people are going to respond to your leadership style. And I think that's something you're certainly going to be known for. Are you going to be the guy that is a, top-down demander, that's a yeller, and that, maybe pat them on the back when you need to, or are you going to be kind of their buddy? And that may change throughout your career. I know certainly as a younger coach, when you're closer to their age, I remember, when you're 22 years old and you're coaching a 17 or 18-year-old, you listen to the same music, you watch the same shows, you're doing the same stuff they are. It's a little easier to be their big brother, but as you get older, it almost becomes a little easier to change your leadership style. Have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I started coaching when I was 19. Now I'm 30. And what's funny is like, it kind of shocks the kids a little bit in the weight room when a song comes on that is new and I know the words. They're kind of like, I'm like that middle-aged coach now. Yeah. Like, it's like, I'm young enough to like, I wear the Air Jordans and stuff, you know what I mean? Which, I mean, there's old coaches.
You're a flashy guy.
Nah, I don't know about that, but it's like they're shocked that I know some of the words. But I always used to start a one-on-one meeting with, listen, man, I'm the young guy. Like, I listen to all the same things you do, and it's like I'm getting to the point now where it's like
you're getting like me,
man. Like when I have those meetings, like it's harder and harder for say, hey, man, I do the same things and listen to the same things because I'm getting out of that. Like, I used to be good with the new terminology. I couldn't tell you what
I can't. They were saying some stuff today, and I was like, man, I have no idea. Can you guys translate that for me? I'm an old guy now, so I get to wear the old hat, and they think it's funny. So, Even if I know something, I don't give into that. I let them think that
yeah,
they're teaching me something.
Especially if they try to get you to say something that's probably a little inappropriate.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, man.
I'll look at my guy and say, "Can I say that or no?" Like, so
they dig that. But I think that just kind of leads into like what you're talking about, reputation. It's not just like with community and parents and admin, like reputation with the kids, you know, because they're going to understand your reputation. So for example, I remember there was a coach in high school. He was the buddy coach, but you know, when head coach wasn't looking, he was buddy. But if head coach was observing or looking at him, I mean, it was just business. And, you know, that was kind of a mixed signal for us. You know, it's like sometimes like he's cool, but like sometimes like, dude, what happened to you? You know what I mean? Like, did someone steal your cereal this morning? Like,
right.
But I think that reputation, you know, it falls into your brand of who you are as an individual, what you tolerate, what kids are able to do and say, and that kind of goes into your whole leadership style.
It's funny, when I don't know, you probably grew up like this too. Our coaches were always like super demanding and never really friendly. And we loved them. And then we loved them, you know, because we knew like they're trying to teach us to be men and making us tough. And it's important to, you know, I mean, that's just how we were kind of quote unquote raised, you know, as football players or any sport. You know, it was very tough and demanding. And I really enjoyed that as a player. So when you become a coach, you automatically think, man, I'm going to be that same guy. I'm going to be the one that's going to bust in the doors and, you know, give him the rah-rah, Newt Rockney type speech. And I think that's what's appealing to when you become a coach is you're like that. But then, you know, as times change, you know, you ask a kid like who Newt Rockney is now and they don't know who he is, or Vince Lombardi, or like, you know, some of those guys. In a couple of years, they won't know who Nick Saban is, you know, and so it's just,
like, they don't know who they are.
You can't coach like that guy.
They don't know who they are, but they will say, I don't know who they are, but they not like us. Like that's what they will say. But,
and so you got to be able to relate a little bit, and you have to stay relevant enough with them. And the number one thing that I think about when you talk about leadership style is care. And I think if they know that you care, you could be an older or a really older coach. You could be a younger coach. But it's like you could be close to their age, but you may not be able to relate to them because you don't know how to define the line between buddy and coach. And I think it can get I think it may be harder as a younger coach, honestly.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, it's funny. It makes me think about a story this past summer. So, you know, we do the summer trips, you know, where we go and we scrimmage and 7-on-7 with other teams that aren't in our area. You know, we went 3 hours away to the beach this year. We stayed in the hotel for 2 nights. But, you know, we went to the water park one day. Kids ate it up. They loved every minute of it. But I remember we're floating down the lazy river and, you know, like there's like 8 players beside me. And like, I'm just laid back and they're splashing me with water and stuff, you know, and we're having a good time. And I paused and stopped them. I said, hey guys, y'all know I love y'all, right? They're like, oh yeah, coach, like we appreciate it. I was like, well, here's what I want. I want you to remember this moment right here in July.
Core memory.
Remember this moment, because guess what? When we hit August, there's going to be a time where I'm getting on you. You're upset with me, but just remember, I love you. And I think that's back to kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
If you care and they know you care, you probably can get away with a lot more than a kid that doesn't know you care.
100%. Or I'll tell you another one too. When I first took the job, my first head job, you know, you come in and you got your whole, or, you know, I have my whole, you know, thing. We're structured. We got player contracts. We're going to be super disciplined and all that. Well, kids can read BS like nobody else, right? Especially today's kid. They're so informed. They're so like in tune to like BS. It's uncanny. And so when you go in there and you're setting all these standards and all that, the very first instance that you have to implement, let's say, a punishment, you have to come through on that.
100%.
Like, you have to, because if you don't, they are going to judge you on that forever. So we had a receiver that missed practice on a Thursday to go to a baseball tournament thing. He's a really good baseball player, great kid, just unbelievable young man. And we still have a relationship this day, you know, through social media, and I'm following him and stuff. And he's great, but he missed practice. And our rule was, if you miss, you don't play. But I made him dress out, and he didn't play on his really big game for us. It was actually the second week. We had a chance to win and go 2-0. And that was really big for the program at the time. And so I sat him the whole game, and I could just see people whispering, is he gonna put him in? Is he gonna put him in? Is he gonna do it? The game's close. Is he gonna put him in? I never did. and we won the game, thankfully. But they knew that I was willing to lose the game to do what was right, and that right there kind of cemented to them like, oh wow, okay, he's taking this very seriously.
Like
and
there's no
what he
player
says.
bigger than the program. Like
Correct.
that's the message, and
that's the brand.
Yep.
That's the brand.
Yep. Well, as the kids would say these days, you stood on business. Like
I stood on business
your
that
business,
day.
and it's,
Yes,
and
I should have said that, but
yeah, no, but man, like to your point, it. I always use, and I'm not even a parent. Like you're a parent, but it's like I saw a video the other day. It said, "Don't threaten your kids. Do what you're saying. Don't say, hey, if you don't act right, we're going to leave. No, pick them up and leave, and then tell them why we left." And that's probably easier said than done.
I think that was Jordan Peterson that said that.
It might have been, but I don't remember who it was. But
that's good. It's
like,
good stuff.
To your point, kids can tell if you're for real or not, and they will call you out on it if you're not, but they will also use it to their advantage. So to your point, if you would have played that kid, everybody, one, it would have caused two things. One, kids would have thought they could have been like him, or two, it would have been like, well, you let so-and-so play. It would have been the comparison game. And, but no, that's a really good example.
Yeah. It's not necessarily, and I'll just kind of finish that up with this. It just kind of popped in my head. It's not necessarily what you do all the time, even what you do or what you say, but it's also what you allow. And what you allow, you actually promote. And not only promote, like that you're promoting that to become who you are and what you're known for. So that's just something that I try to remember. I'm definitely not perfect at that at all. We always make mistakes, but that's just something I need to kind of constantly remind myself of as a leader. But And
to add on to that, I think this is something I've learned that I've had to adapt my brand from my first year of coaching to now 11 years later. Is I used to be that type, because like super type A, and I want things to go a certain way. It used to be where it was this way or no way.
Yeah. So I think when you're talking about, your brand, your reputation is so important. We keep talking about that, but not necessarily important just for your leadership style and the impact that you can have on your kids or your community abroad, but it also can impact your career, obviously. I can remember being a young coach and, being a position coach, kind of establishing myself as a wide receiver coach and wanting to be the best wide receiver coach I can be. And I think that did a lot for my career. I was able to, do a lot of things that I had goals and aspirations of being a coordinator. I was a coordinator at a very young age, probably wasn't ready for my first coordinator position. But you learn, you live and learn. And then, going and working at York for 6 years, I was able to come in as a JV position coach after a coordinator position and really work my way up. And I wasn't complaining about, I want to be the coordinator. Obviously, I wanted that opportunity at one point, but I took that time to be really, really good where my feet were. And not only did it give me time to learn and to become, a better coordinator or the best coordinator I could be, but it also allowed me to build my brand with that staff and with that head coach and what they did for me and giving me opportunities down the road. So I think that's also important to understand is, you want to do what's best for the people around you, but in turn can also help you as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that because, whether you know it or not, like people are watching, and it may be internally or externally, but like, I can't tell you how many times someone internally is watching and they make a call for you that you don't even know about that opens doors for you. And I think that's a big thing. Branding your career, it's, that's not it is the goal, but it's not the ultimate goal, but I think if you ask me, what's the perfect staff to work on? And I think that's a lot of coaches who want to be the perfect position coach for their position and are trying to create a reputable brand for themselves and the program. Like if I could choose, like, it doesn't matter where you played college ball, how many years of experience. If you gave me two options and there was a staff where every position coach wanted their position to be the best position ever, and they were working on their brand, I think I would choose that staff 100%.
Yeah, I agree. I think several examples come to mind with coaches that I've coached with that do that very thing that taught me how to do that. It's like they took it so seriously as a position coach and as if they were a head coach. And for multiple reasons. One is to have to maximize their impact with whoever their sphere of influence is. And for them, it's their position group. And you want to build your brand as a reputation. If your goal is to go beyond that, that's not an ego thing. That's to just expand your sphere of influence. So if you become a coordinator, now you're over multiple position groups, you're over multiple coaches. If you become a head coach, then your sphere of influence grows even more, so you get to maximize your impact even greater. The thing that I think that, for me, I see guys that are really, really eager to be head coaches, and you're never really ready. And I think that's a great aspiration to have. But if you're not a head coach, don't get frustrated. Just try to use this as time to try to get better and hone your craft. Don't complain about it. Just be really, really good where your feet are. I remember I was the coordinator at York, and a new head coach came in. He ran his own offense, and so he was like, Jamie, you're not going to be the coordinator. I want you to coach receivers. And obviously that's a step back and down. And I was obviously disappointed because I wanted to be the coordinator, but I didn't allow it to, ruin my relationship with that new head coach. Because I knew that, if I was going to stay and choose to stay at that school, then I was going to be loyal, and loyalty is huge as a brand point, right? As your reputation, you want to be known for being loyal. And so, and it was good for the program for us to be cohesive. So let's do it. If I choose to stay, I'm going to be all in. So I did that for a whole year. Asked him to be the coordinator the next year, and he's like, look, give me one more year. And then some opportunities came up where I was able to apply for head jobs, and I did. And I think I was a finalist at the point that they called him, and he gave me a great reference and even told him the whole thing. Like, hey, it was tough on Jamie. He had to take a step back. He did everything we asked him to do. And I think that's the reason I got my first head football job, not knowing that I did everything I could to stay loyal to him as he came in.
Yeah, no, and I think that kind of goes back to that. And sometimes internally, you're going to have people that vouch for you just because of your loyalty, and you made a good point. It's like, if you're not the coordinator yet, that's okay, because it almost provides a an instance of self-evaluation. Okay, like, I want to be an offensive coordinator. Well, something I think, and this is kind of a little bit off topic, but if you cannot break down your offense position by position, teach the scheme, but also the technique, the alignment, and teach every nuance to every one of your assistant coaches, in my opinion, you're not ready to be a coordinator.
And then be able to call plays. Yes. And then be a caller. Then you have to be able to call it. Like, I think those are two things. I think you nailed it. It's like you got to know your position and teach it, but then there's also the performance factor of calling the game on both sides.
Like we're probably going to talk about this on every episode: application versus knowledge.
100%.
You may know every pass scheme out there. You may know every air raid scheme, but do you know how to apply the drop with the cap, with the progression? Do you know how to teach alignments and wide receiver spacings and the get offs and the top of the route? And route, you know what I mean? It's every little nuance.
Same thing on defense. You're teaching match coverage, and you're using, like, what's my leverage? What's my alignment? And then what technique am I using? Where should my eyes be? Or when you're getting a fast three or back in the down, and you have to be able to scaffold that.
And that's something sides. I see a lot. Like, people, sometimes will talk, and it's like, what'd you think about the team you played last week? If a coach calls me that I know, well, like, the first thing I try to share is, well, the brand. What we're talking about, like, what are they known for? Well, man, I'm gonna tell you right now, they're good people over there. Like, they're going to do you right. And especially if it's a really, really good team that, probably has a chance to blow a lot of people out. Like, I'll be straight up, listen, they're really good, but they're going to take care of you. You know what I mean? They're not going to embarrass you. Mm-hmm. Like, they get their lead and whatnot. They'll sub, they'll do the right thing. So the first thing is brand. Second thing's players. Man, they got some cats, or, they're very average, but their coaching is really, really good. Like, they're going to be in a good position.
Are they physical? Are they tough?
Yep.
Are they
just their brand? And I think
are they
that's
just
just
make mistakes. Yeah.
Yep. The communication portion of, what, like you said, the reputation. What do other teams and coaches think about you? Not even from what you stand for, but just who your brand is, because we play teams at York. And I remember people were like, man, every time we played y'all, it was just grinding and pounding in the trenches. They knew that they had to try to stop the run because we always had some big linemen. But, and the last thing to tie in what you were talking about with the application is, so when I don't ever judge scheme, like, I won't tell a coach, oh, their scheme's awful. They're playing, odd to read, just cookie cutter stuff. I'll say their scheme's okay, but their alignment and stuff, not very good. They have guys who should be out of the fit that are in the fit, so they're making them a dual player when they shouldn't be based on, the way the scheme's designed. But, that's all just around the application versus the knowledge. Like, everybody probably knows what stubby is, but are you playing it right? Are the right guys out the fit? Is the star playing outside and on top? If not, so things like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, we talked about, establishing and really creating your identity. That's what we're talking about, is your brand. And so I think those are things that are important. The next piece that we're going to get into is more building your coaching philosophy. I think these are key. And no matter if you're a position coach, coordinator, head coach, but how you coach is really should be built around a few things, in my opinion. I remember reading a book when I was a young coach, and it was introduced to me by a mentor of mine, Joe Salas. And so he said, man, you need to read Good to Great by Jim Collins. And then there's like 3 books in the series. It's Good to Great, Built to Last, and there's one more in the series, I believe. I don't know if I got to the 3rd book or not, but he told me that all the administrators in the area were like, doing professional development, and that's a book that they had to read. And so he would use that in his interviews, and I thought that was brilliant. So I was like, yeah, I'll read it to have a couple, talking points in the interviews one day. But man, it really kind of changed my coaching career a lot, because it gave me a guideline from an organizational standpoint of how to craft a mission statement, a vision statement, your goals, your core values. It talked about the hedgehog process. It also talked about the process, or the flywheel. And so I'd say it's a great resource. It's probably, 20, 25 years old now, but it's a really good resource, and it's really backed by a lot of, data points and things like that. But really, I think you have to craft your mission, your personal mission statement first. I think you've talked about, like, what is your why? This is really kind of the core piece to your coaching philosophy that guides your decisions and actions personally. And then beyond that, if you're a position coach, then this needs to guide your decisions as a coach, and how you implement things in your drills, or how you lead. Same thing as a coordinator. This is your coaching philosophy, is how you make decisions in whatever plays you're going to run, or personnel things that you're going to have, or how you're going to teach. And then obviously it goes without saying, your coaching philosophy and having core values and how you do things is important as a head coach as well.
Yeah, I think all that's great. I think like you said, to start with, you can't have a philosophy for your program or your team before you have one for yourself. I think you have to really, what am I looking for? What are those things that I want to stand for, my legacy? Like, what do I want to be known for? I think that's huge in terms of creating, digging deep down, because it makes you think, and I think the biggest thing, it's called the MVPs, the mission, vision, principles, what you were talking about, is it makes you research in yourself what you believe in, but it makes you take a step out and go, you know what? I do need to think truly why I want to do this. Like, who inspired me? Why did they inspire me? What were they known for? Who were they are? And that's what I did,
Yeah.
I'm a coach because I had a coach who, inspired me to want to help people and grow young men, and that's the first place I started when I created my own philosophy before I went into my first coaching interview. And I think the biggest thing that you want to communicate in that is, what can you expect from me? And I think that's huge. I think that, we're going to get into the interview process in a little while, but one thing I like to do in every meeting I have, whether it's an interview, whether it is a parent meeting or a player meeting, I like to introduce who I am, what I believe in, and then the very next slide is always, what can you expect from me? And, it's very simple things in terms of, expect. Number one, I'm imperfect, but I do strive to do things in the image of Jesus. So everyone knows right then and there who I am, what I stand for, and what I believe in. But I also want to let them know, listen, I'm human. I do make mistakes. So I think it just clearly communicates who you are, why you're doing this, and what you stand for.
Yeah, I remember I always try to do the thing of like stealing somebody else's. Like as a young coach, you're trying to create your own like packet. And you're like, man, I'm going to get my packet out there. Oh, this packet looks really good. I'm going to use this tagline, and I'm going to use this these core values. And look, I mean, a lot of the core values are going to be the same. Toughness, effort, discipline, commitment, passion. All those. I mean, they're all kind of the same.
Sure.
But I think you really need to believe in those, and then you need to live those out. I mean, it goes back into your reputation. It's like, it's one thing to have stuff on the back of a T-shirt. It's another thing to like live it out. I would rather not have the stuff on the T-shirt and people just say that about who we are than to say that this is what we're living up to. And I don't think it's wrong to have that on T-shirt, because I think it reminds people and your own people, your own players and your own parents to strive. This is what we're striving for. This is our standard. And that can hold you accountable to that. But I would rather our actions and what we do really define who we are. There's a really good, it's actually up there. It's called The Process. It's a book, man. It goes into, I can't remember who
had that book.
And dude, I went
you
through.
Put me on.
Okay, yeah. And so it goes through like how it's great, because it says, how do we want to treat each other? And you have to answer the question. And you have to define that. How do we want to treat the other team? Answer the question. How do we want, what do we want the community to think and know about us? And so you go through this whole thing, and it's a really good series to answer the same questions that are authentic to who you are and what you are in your program. And then you get to kind of mold that into your own thing. And so I remember, our mission statement at Cannon was, we want to be known statewide for class and toughness and compete for championships. That was our thing. That was like everything that we did was in there. Our core values: fast, fight, finish, family. And so those are, inside those, you have to define those. And you want your players to define that. You want your parents to define that. You want every meeting that you have to like go back into those over and over and over again. And that really worked well for us. I think people knew what our mission was. They knew what our values were. And then every decision that you make just goes right back into that. So when you have organizational decisions, people know where you're coming from.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, here we go again, application. So your core values, are you applying them? So, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but here's a little nugget for you. But I wanted, and Caleb was a big part of this. He was like, man, I think that we do a good job of showing our core values. But I think we need a way to remind the kids every day with something, like instead of just breaking it down on, Mavericks on 3, So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take my core values that I have for our team that I really feel we do a good job of applying, and I'm going to try to reconstruct it to mean the same thing, but maybe have an analogy. So what I came up with, and I don't mind if anybody ever uses this, like I thought it was just neat that I even thought about this, but our acronym is DRIP, D-R-I-P, discipline, response, integrity, persevere. And the association that I use with the players to teach them is, we want to think about a leaky faucet that drips. Eventually, it's going to drip, 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 and it's going to collect enough water where eventually every time it drips, it's going to overflow onto something else. And I wanted them to associate these 4 words spelled drip, and everything we do, we should be dripping and overflowing into other people that our values stand out. Is kind of how
I like that. I was actually thinking drip from like, I think that's a word now the new kids.
I had to make it clear, guys. I'm not talking about clothes or how you dress.
I think you could use it that way. I was thinking like, okay, this is what you want to be known for. This is the drip. I don't know. That sounds cheesy. So I'm going to stop.
I told my fiance Catherine about it at first, and before I explained the drip analogy, she was like, "I hope you're going somewhere with this." So,
I like yours because yours is definitely I think unique. I haven't heard that one. I have heard like some fast and fight and finish stuff, but then I think defining those is where the uniqueness comes from. So definitely like to use things that are, I like that. That's really good. I think having that coaching philosophy, the personal philosophy, having the coaching philosophy for your team or your position is really big. And I think to your point, just reminding, I guess we can get into this a little bit too. Some ways that we were able to remind and reinforce, I guess is a better word, reinforce our core values was like having people, not me, say stuff about it. So instead of me sitting in front of the team every day and then reminding them of a core value or reminding them, we did it in several ways. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on this too. We did guest speakers. So that was a really cool thing that we did. We did Thursday guest speakers. We had coaches on our staff tell like their story and how it relates to one of our core values. We also had business people from the community. We had people inside the school tell these things, and it was really good. We had, every week that we had during the season, we had a new guest speaker, and so that they were able, and I would tell them, hey, can you attach this core value, or I'd give them a list. Which core value do you think your story relates to the most? And then if you don't mind sharing that with our team for 25 minutes after Thursday practice. That was a huge one. We also did one where we had the teammate of the week. I think we call it like the Cougar of the week. We do it at Kings Mountain now, called the Mountaineer of the week. And basically the teammate that wins it chooses the next one, and they have to tell the reason why they chose that teammate based on at least 2 core values. And I think that's just little things that we've done to try to reinforce those.
Yeah, I think the more reinforcements you have, the better. One thing that comes to mind that we did immediately was, we set a standard. So like, I think, I always use this analogy, but if you're writing a paper in English and your teacher says, write the paper on the Civil War, and that's all the instructions they give you, and you get the paper back and you get a 65, you're going to be like, what? I didn't know how long it should be. I didn't know what else it should be on. But if they give you a rubric that says, make sure these topics are covered, it is at least 3 to 5 pages. When did it start? What was the cause? What was the solution? What was the ending? Now you know exactly what to hit in the rubric. Well, I think it's just like that with coaching. So we try to define, when you show up every day in the classroom, in a meeting room, in the weight room, at practice, we're going to define what it should look like for you. Because, there's 4 categories that we would use. And basically we had like compelled and the more sophisticated words, but then we broke it down for the kids to make it simple. And basically we told them that like tier 4 are your leaders, tier 3 are where everyone needs to be committed, and then like tier 2 was I can't remember exactly what it was, but you were in a spot where we could get you there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But then you had cynical was the very last one. Yes. And like that was something we wouldn't put up with, and the kids knew, but we just tried to spell out for them what it should look like in everything you do to communicate.
Well, and it tells them too, it gives them like a way to self-evaluate. I was the same way. We had that, I think it's called some kind of commitment continuum or something, but it was like resistant was the very bottom one. You're resistant to any kind of coaching. If anybody tries to, correct you, you're always like smacking your teeth or whatever. You're not showing up on time. The next one was, I can't remember. I think maybe consistent. So now you're kind of in that, all right, I'm showing up, but I'm not like going over the top here, trying to do everything I can for the betterment of the team. And then it was, committed. All right, now I'm doing a little bit more. And then it was compelled, which is now I'm getting people to, I'm doing, committed was, I'm doing, above and beyond what I need to do. And then compelled was I'm doing above and what I have to do, but I'm also bringing others with me. I'm compelling others with my actions. Yes. And I think that's great. I love that. I think Mark Hoover put me onto that early on at York. And so shout out Mark. He's a strength coach and great guy. Great guy. And he was at Metrolina most recently. And I'll never forget, man, we were scrimmaging over at Concord, and Hoover was warming them up, and they're doing RPR. Yeah, and like you just see some teams walking by, and they're like looking like, what are they I'll tell
doing?
You what, though, if he's doing it, it's probably working. And
there's no doubt. So, I'll be honest. Probably about 6 months before that, I stumbled upon a article about it, and I did it before I worked out.
You feel good?
Body day. I swear my hips felt like they were brand new. It might be a placebo effect, but I swear my hips are so open.
I'm getting sold now, man. I can feel everything. So it's like I might do a couple of RPRs. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's an interesting thing. But yeah, I think going back to the commitment, I think you're right. You have to define what that is. It's like, what does it mean to finish? Hey, finish. Like, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Like, like finish where? Finish how? Does that mean finish with touching the line? Does that mean finish? What does that? So you have to define that for the kid, or they won't know. But once you give them a standard, then you can hold them accountable.
Even like tackling, you have to define the finish of a tackle. You know, whether it's clamp, squeeze, drive, whatever it is. But you have to associate what you want them to do. But like, it's got to be clear communication. You can't assume that they know what you're talking about.
Like show up on time. Well, there needs to be a time, and it needs to be a location, and it needs to be like with like what do your clothes need to be on? Do your cleats? I mean, kids may show up on time, but they're bringing down their shoulder pads and helmet, and you don't want them to do that. And it's frustrating. And I know that goes some without being said, but you see programs all the time that don't do that. Or you may show up to a program and they're not used to that. And so I think defining that's huge and a big part of your core philosophy. I guess the next thing that we can kind of talk about is kind of assessing team needs and then how to adapt your philosophy based on those needs. So I know when I took my first and only head job, I'm no longer a head coach now, I'm a coordinator, but when I took my job, the job, it was definitely a transition period for that program in school. And so we had a lot of, I would say, like low-hanging fruit. I definitely think that the turnaround programs are ones that I think are appealing to a lot of coaches. One, because to get a team to go from like average to good is probably I'm not saying it's easy by any means, but I think it can be fixed with a few culture changes and maybe some personnel changes, whether that be in coaching or players or whatever it is. And so I think if you can attack that low-hanging fruit, you typically attack that with your culture, and that's obviously aligned with your philosophy. Now, so going into this one, we needed a lot of the biggest one for us was commitment by the players and understanding what commitment is. Like, hey man, be committed. Well, what does that mean, coach? Well, that means you need to show up on like a certain amount of workouts in the summer. It means showing up on time to practice. It means, doing what we expect. And we define that throughout the entire program, but that commitment was big for us. And I remember that was the kind of what we saw in assessing the needs of that particular team. And once we got the commitment right, then obviously player development comes along with that. You start, having more practice time because kids are showing up in the summer. Well, obviously they're going to get a little better. And then you can become committed, then you become an attractive program. And then now, people want to be a part of that program, both coaches and players. And so I think that commitment level is a big deal, but you have to be committed as a coach first. You have to be there all the time. You need to be the first one there and the last one to leave. Your coaches have to see you do that. Goes back into your brand. People will buy into your brand, and your philosophy needs to reflect that. And then ultimately you can take care of that. The second part of assessing team needs is going from good to great. That's probably a whole different story. But talk to us a little bit about what, you've been a head coach and had to assess some things, and kind of what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. I think, there's multiple categories that come to mind that you have to assess, and whether is it a character/culture issue? Is it a physical issue, a developmental issue? Is it a mental issue? Like, do they just not understand the game of football? Is there not a great recreational program that starts kids out early, because there are towns like that, unfortunately. But something for me, and touching on this, taking over the job after you left, being a first private school job, I think it's important to point this out. Summer commitment is such a big deal in the summer for private school, is because those kids aren't going to Myrtle Beach for a week. Like, some of those kids.
I go to Myrtle Beach.
Oh,
I do. I'm a North Myrtle Beach.
I'm from
guy.
Myrtle Beach. I live in Georgetown. We drive 30 minutes north to go to the beach for vacation. But it's like those kids come up. Hey, coach, just want to let you know I'm going to be gone the next 3 weeks. I'm going to Fiji. Yeah. And it's like, so it's something that you have to.
It's a delicate.
It is, and then you kind of take for granted, like, coming from the public school where most kids, the only thing they're going to give you is, coach, I got to work. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just like,
it's a different model.
Different dynamic.
And I think, so to what you're saying is you have to go in and assess that. Is this a part of the established broader culture of this community?
Sure.
That, what hill am I going to die on for this? Now, my thing was, we ain't going to be any good unless we're committed. 100%. And you'll never be any good. And I'm going to fight that one. I'm going to fight that tooth and nail. And I just throw it back at them. When you guys told me that you guys wanted to compete for championships.
100%.
Well, if you want to do that, then there ain't no other option. And so I think that resonated with that group of kids.
Yeah. And it's funny because, I didn't think that commitment was necessarily an issue when I took over in the summer.
Yeah.
However,
it could change year to year, though. I mean,
however, I ramped it up even more. So when I took over, when you left, our summer schedule was we didn't start, I think, until 8, and we weren't done until like 11:30. And I'll be honest, that first summer for the kids, in my opinion, it was miserable. Like, it's so hot at 10:45, 11:15, and like, obviously you don't, at that school, we didn't have full control over our schedule because there's so many athletes that need to lift and do other things. But like, what I noticed was we were doing strength and conditioning and speed, and then we weren't going to practice until 10:30, and at the hottest point of the day. So that second year, it was a hill I was dying on. Like, we're starting at 7:00 because we need to beat the heat. Like, there's no point to stay out here until 11:30 in the day when we can get them in and out at 7 to 10. And, one thing that you learn is when you're building a philosophy, as great as it could be, you're still going to have people who agree or disagree.
Yeah.
And setting that standard of explaining why we're doing these things and the benefits for the kids. Because, as a coach, I can tell you right now, us lifting at 7 a.m. in the summer, that didn't benefit me. Like, I had to get up earlier because just because lift starts at 7 doesn't mean I show up at 6:50.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I try to get there hour 15 to get everything ready. So I think that's a big part of it.
And the same can be true too outside the independent world. There's some kids that, and I've coached at several places in public school. So the one thing that we see is a lot of these underclassmen don't drive, or maybe you're in a community that there's not a lot of kids that drive. And so they have to rely on parents to get them at practice. Well, they got to work, so we like doing morning stuff, right? We get our day done as coaches. We show up at 8, we're out at like 11, 11:30, maybe noon, and we get both the JV, varsity done. Well, you got 50% of your kids there. Everything's great with the schedule. I get to go home and cut grass and take care of stuff, but like, that's not best for the program if none of your kids are there. So what we've done is we've transitioned to evening, which I don't like. But you know what? We get like 95% of our kids there, unless they're, because they're done with work. Mom and dad have time to drop them off and pick them up. It's a much more normal schedule. So we had to adapt to, our community and what's best for our community, and our parents, and what's for our kids, not what's best for the ease of my schedule.
Sure.
And I think that's something that you have to do. I think that's something that it falls right in line with your philosophy. Your philosophy shouldn't be, well, we're going to do this for what's best for Coach Bolton. We need to do this what's best for the majority of the people in our community and program.
And some people I feel struggle with that. You know what I mean? Especially
100%.
it's easy to get complacent when you've been coaching for 15, 20 years and you've been doing it a certain way. And I think that's what we're talking about, like making sure you adapt your philosophy for the needs, because everything we do is for the kids.
Yeah.
Like, everything as a coach, everything you should do should be for the benefit of the kids. And if there's ever a moment in time, and I'm imperfect, I'm human, I'm sure there's been a moment in time, you have to reevaluate, like, listen, it's not about me. It's about the kids, and I think that's super important. But no, man, I think that kind of leads us into our last part of this segment, is just, what are the main life skills, that you aim to teach beyond the field, and, that could be several things. It could be one thing, but what does it mean to you? If you said, using the platform of football, you try to prepare young men for this once the game is completely over and the cleats are hung up, what would it be?
Yeah, I think that's the most intriguing part of what we do as teachers and coaches. I think your sphere of influence is so important as a teacher and coach. I know it sounds cheesy, but it's not an easy job. And so you have to wake up every day and have a purpose. And my purpose has always been, obviously, to help them beyond the game and use the game to develop the skills necessary for them to lead the life that they want, if that makes sense. So for me, obviously, discipline and toughness to get through adversity. And that probably goes for many coaches, and that's why we like the game so much. We get a little lost, and I'm sure I do all the time, of like the competitive side of winning and doing this, but I don't ever want to lose sight of this matters so much to this young man, because he may never experience this before something in his life happens that he's got to, make a tough decision, for his family, or make a tough decision, in business, or whatever the case may be. And so if we can simulate some life stuff that's going to happen, being a great teammate, managing relationships with your coaches and players, just like you're going to manage relationships with your wife or kids, managing relationships at your job, or having the confidence to overcome things because you've had those experiences before on the field. I think I love seeing that happen. Also, playing a role on a team, right? You may not be the starting quarterback, but your role may be the scout team running back that gets destroyed every day at practice, but makes our team better. And we need to, as coaches, highlight that. And the best coaches do. And I see a lot of programs that do that. But I think now with our game, it's gotten to the point where those values aren't necessarily what's being promoted outside of coaches. I think there's values that are being promoted that are not those values. And I guess we can get into that a little bit, but I think the reason I played football was that I knew I probably wasn't going to be a college level or a high college level player. But I think the life lessons that I learned from football were benefiting my life enough for me to do that for a living, if that's what we want to call it. But and it's a good job to have as a high school football coach. But yeah, I think that's why I coach. I think those are the values that I see. Well, what are your thoughts?
Honestly, man, you hit a lot of what I think. I would say, to add on, I think the biggest thing for me is teaching, and this is for all sports, but teaching an athlete it's bigger than you. That's the number one thing, because life is bigger than you. I joke with Catherine all the time. We're getting married in May, and I say, when you think about your big moments in life, you graduate high school, you graduate college, you get your first head job, you get engaged, you get married. Well, and I'm 30. I'm not old by any means, but we're starting to move in a direction of the big moments in my life are shifting to the big moments in our life that me and her are creating. Mm-hmm. And then eventually down the road, they're going to shift to the big moments in our family and our kids' lives. So I think the one thing I would say sports teaches, and obviously football, is teaching that it's bigger than you. At some point in life, it's going to be about the people that you surround yourself with that you're going to have to lean on, and they're going to have to lean on you. And when the back's against the wall, it teaches you how to respond through tough things, because life, and I will use a baseball terminology, throws curveballs all the time. And, what is your response going to be? Are you going to control what you can control, or are you going to feel sorry for yourself? And I think the biggest thing football did for me, I grew up with two parents heavily involved, grandparents heavily involved. My parents remarried, so I had step parents. There was a lot of people in my life. But I think what football did for me was it taught me that there's something bigger than me. But the second thing it taught me as a player, it taught me the accountability portion, because, my grandma, she loves her some Coach Martin, both of them do. And I was coddled before the game of football, and football was the first real source of truth. Like, hey man, you ain't big bone. That ain't a thing. But it was like, football was the first true source for me. And I didn't really have a coach say that, but it was a part of the game. Here's the truth. And, you have people in your life that they don't share that truth with you. It allows transparency to the realness. That's a really big thing for me.
Yeah. So that kind of brings us to our next segment of this. So far, we kind of talked about a coaching brand and coaching philosophy, but it's really important to think about how to push your reputation out, kind of beyond your sphere of influence, and how that can impact your job, how it can impact maybe your future opportunities. And Dustin, you're really good at this social media stuff. I'm millennial, but I'm really Gen X at heart. So I really have a hard time pressing all the buttons to do social medias.
Yeah, man, I think social media, it can be great and it can be bad. It can be great because, to me, for marketing your brand and your team, social media should be used to share, what you're doing, your beliefs, and that you're truly walking the walk of what you believe in. But social media can also be that woe is me mentality. It can be an envious thing. It can be a comparison thing. And I think that for your brand, for your team, the reason you're posting, the number one reason is to highlight within your community. You want everyone who is directly involved with your community to know what the team and program is up to, what they're doing, what they believe in. In social media, it's the beautiful thing of once it reaches so far, it's going to reach people who are not directly correlated, whether that is other communities, other teams, other players. And I think it's super important because you may inspire another program to do something that is going to make them a better program. And I think, we all borrow ideas. Sometimes you come up with something new, but for me, I don't really mind sharing anything with any program, any coach, because back to it's about the kids. That's what I think. And even if it's not directly our team or our kids, if we're still impacting other kids, I'm all on board. So I think number one, with your social media plan, the biggest thing is you got to remain consistent. I've seen social media programs that are really good in season, and then you don't hear from them for 7 months. So I think the biggest thing is consistent. And I think the way you do that is like you do anything else. You come up with a plan. You sit down with your staff. I remember when me and you sat down, we highlighted what do we want social media to look like off season and in season. That way it's consistent. And I think there's little room for error with consistency because you know what's expected, what day, what needs to be posted. But I think, the biggest thing is understand that, understand your capabilities.
Yeah.
If you're a smaller school, a smaller staff, maybe you only have one platform, and that's the platform that's going to be most reach within your community. Maybe you have 2 coaches on staff who handle social media, where you can handle having a Twitter or an X or having an Instagram or a Facebook, a TikTok, whatever it fits your brand. But I think that's the super important part of social media is to share what you're doing with your community, but beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it also helps in like networking too, personally. I think the networking piece too, obviously when you're sharing the brand about the organization you're with, obviously that's reflective of you as well. And I think that's important for not just you personally, but all the other coaches and all the other players to have that brand association, if you will. So so I like that. I know when I kind of made you the social media coordinator, and but the planning definitely needs to come from, it's probably good to incorporate as many people on the plan to have the most ideas, and then you also have to be able to execute it. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is don't overextend and try to do too much, because then you're just gonna fall away. And it's about communication at the heart of it.
No, I agree. Like, what can you execute? If you can't execute it, it may be a great idea. It's just like scheme, maybe a great scheme. But if you can't execute it, if your lineman can't block for 7.5 seconds, you probably shouldn't run sail return. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're not going to be able to
concept.
run.
It's a sick concept.
Great concept, but you better have about 6 seconds in the pocket. But this kind of brings us into the next segment, which I'm super excited to talk about, and I want to kind of hear your opinion on some things. But this segment's going to be all about the interview process.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've got some good stories I want to share, and I'm sure you do. But, all right, you're preparing for the interview. Like whether it's an assistant coach, it's a coordinator role, it's a head coaching role, you're preparing for this interview. What's the number one thing you do before you even start preparing?
The number one thing, if I'm interested in a job, is, or if somebody reaches out and says, hey, this job is open. And typically, me personally, I'm not out there like looking. So I'm not on somebody say, hey man, you know, so-and-so is open. I was like, I had no idea. And so, but if I am intrigued by that, then the very first thing I try to do is try to find someone close to that program that I can trust to give me as much information about that program. So then, and usually you don't want to deal with anybody that's on any kind of hiring committee or anything like that. But, if it's a trusted, employee that's close to the program, they can give you some insight, and you got to take all that with a grain of salt. You can't take everything at face value, but you do want to try to talk to someone that can give you some insight as to what is needed in that program, and then what they're also looking for to see if you're the right fit. I don't think it's smart to try to find the needs and then try to figure out what they're looking for and then adapt a lot to that. I don't think that's going to be sustainable for you if that's not who you are and what they need, whether that be schematically or philosophically or from a relational standpoint. So I think that's the very first thing that I try to do. And then within that, assess those needs. Where are they at? Obviously, win losses and all that stuff. But who do they have coming back? Can you have some success early to try to galvanize support from the community? I think is a big one. I think you gotta have some success early for them to buy in. And so, do you feel like that's something that can be done? And if not, that's a tough one to take. A lot of obviously more jobs come open that need rebuilding. But if you ever take that job that is trying to go from good to great and follow a really good coach and a good program, that's really, really difficult to do. And you got to be ready for that. And you got to be ready for some pushback, especially because it's like I said, it's hard to find those little successes if the team is going 10-2 and 10-2 and 10-2 and pushing 3-4 rounds deep. Like, man, you got to win the thing, to have any kind of success early. So you got to be ready to kind of weather that storm and be savvy enough to kind of navigate through that. But yeah, I think that's the very first step. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's super important to understand who you're relying on for information.
100%.
Definitely has to be someone you trust. And I would say it needs to be someone who knows about the program, but not is necessarily associated with the program. And the reason I say that is because, I've reached out to coaches before about opportunities or programs and staffs, and, they have been on the staff for 8 years. So, they are either like super like, man, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, or they are, man, this is awful, stay far away. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? And it's, and obviously there's a lot in between, but I think if you can find someone who's not directly associated, but has a good association with, I think that's someone to lean on. But you have to do your research, and really that kind of, I think it can be specific to who you are and what you're looking for, because, I think me and you are in a part of life that we've been head coaches. We think we will be again one day. There's no doubt about it. But, we also understand that we don't want to be a head coach bad enough where you just jump into a job to say that you're the head coach. Like
100%.
And I think we both have learned through the assistant jobs, the coordinator jobs, and the head coaching jobs that we've had. I think that we have learned things that are non-negotiables to being a great job to take over, whether it's a coordinator or a head coach. So one, I would say, like you said, research specific to your needs and your wants. It is a huge thing, because you can't adapt for something else. Like you are who you are, what you believe in. So, if you're going to a school, because this is a big topic these days, and it's not as tough as it used to be. But number one thing, if you don't have sport-specific weightlifting classes or an opportunity for your kids to lift during school, you're behind the 8 ball. So, if there's a school that don't support that, or they say we can't make that work, well, to me, I don't think that would work, because like every school that is competitive and every school that, has that brand of championship, they do that to make it work.
Yeah, I think that's obviously goes into the research too. I would say if they don't have it and the schools around them don't also have it, and that's a reason for it. That's why we keep doing this. Like, hey, well, they don't have it and we don't have it. Well, that could be a way for you to establish some sort of competitive advantage in, when you take the job. Like, hey, what are you guys willing to like work with some of these things? Because I think that could give us a competitive advantage, especially if you're trying to go from like good to great. It doesn't have to be just a weight room, but it could be anything. It could be, it could be facilities. It could be technology. It could be whatever you feel like after you assess the needs. And I think asking those questions to those trusted individuals, or with your own research, but I mean, that's kind of how the research goes. I'll tell you one person to talk to is the former coach, if you can, if they're open to it. And you still have to take that with a grain of salt. You can't take it at face value, because they could be burned by that, and they could, obviously turn you away from that opportunity. But if it's a program, and I had a conversation with a coach that just stepped down, and it's open, and they had a really good year, and we had a 2.5-hour conversation. I never met him, and it was just a really good conversation, and he was super honest, and so he had a lot of success. in his career, but he was still giving me the speed bumps, if you will, the hurdles that in every program and every job's going to have issues.
Yes.
And no job is perfect. There is no perfect job. It's just, do you feel like you're the right fit in, solving the problems with that program, or can you live with the outcomes that you perceive or that you anticipate that program achieving in the future? And I think those are just questions that you have to understand before you ever go into that process. And then, ultimately, if you do make that decision, I would say I'm actually against interviewing to interview. I used to be for it. But I'm actually against it now. And I've stopped doing that. I don't think I really ever did that. But I don't do that anymore. I don't just interview to interview.
It's funny. I heard an AD in a video I was watching the other day. He said, you're interviewing for a head coaching job. It depends on the sport. What sport you're interviewing for. He said, because let me tell you, if you got a football or a basketball opening, every coach thinks they're qualified and every coach sending their stuff in. He said, that's just how it is. He said, every basketball and head coaching and football head coaching, we have over 100 people apply every single time. He said, sometimes it's out of state. He said, but sometimes it's the coach down the street that applied last time. He said, it just always. So I agree with you. I don't think you apply to interview unless you truly have, I could see this being a road I could go down if everything aligns, but it's not I'm just going to interview for experience. I don't believe in that either. Because there's other ways that you can prepare yourself. And the number one thing, build your brand. Number two thing, build your philosophy and be able to sell that. And, you can't fake it.
Because you got to get the job done once you get the job. And you don't want to be the person known for, like, okay, he's a great interviewer, probably adapted a little bit to what he thought we needed at the school, and so he did great. I just don't think you could be that way and really have success long term. I just don't think, and you probably won't be happy either, because you got to be somebody you're not. I think you really have to look for and be patient. And it's hard, man, especially if you want your first head job. But that's why I'm at a spot in my career that I want to be a part of, like, great communities and great programs at this current capacity. And so if I ever do look for another job, then I'm going to be super patient and make sure that it fits, my life right now. Am I willing to move? Am I willing to drive an hour? Am I willing to, how much time is this going to take away from family? And, you just have to assess that as you go. And I think all that research kind of goes back into that. One thing I will say is, if you don't have enough research, the interview itself could also serve as research for that. And I know we're talking about head jobs, but this could be for coordinator jobs too. The number one thing that I want to know is who's making the decisions, who's hiring the coach, right? And then who is holding that coach accountable? Is it the principal, superintendent, school board, the guy down the road that has all the money, that gives all the to the program, like, the big booster, like, I mean, and all those are good. And I'm not saying that any of those are bad. I think you just need to know that going in. Because there's a lot of politics involved.
No, I agree. I think, to help kind of talk on this, let's kind of shift gears. What do you think are, let's do it from a minimal standpoint. You can only take two things into the interview with you. What are you taking in?
47-page packet.
That's one thing too.
So that's one thing. One is, so I don't know. I think if I everything that I'd go into interviews with, I want them to know up front that they're getting a organized person that can communicate well. And so I think the packet, and then don't look at the packet as much. Like, when you're talking, say in that packet, there's articles of evidence for all the things that we want to implement in the program, with the understanding that we can adapt to this culture and community. But we want to show that we have a plan, have a calendar, have all that in the packet. And then the second thing is, you want to present yourself well. I've heard of many stories of people going into interviews not in a suit and tie. And I'm not saying you have to do that for a coordinator role, depending on that type of, but nobody's ever going to get on you for being overdressed. in any scenario. And that's just maybe a rule for life. Like, don't go in there with, like, I heard of coaches interviewing with like tennis shoes on. And look, you may have gotten the job, but there's certain places that, that's just not the thing. So I think looking the part, and then, which is professional, obviously, you want it to be a professional thing. You want it to be important, but then have your stuff in a packet binder that is as professional as you can make it.
Sure.
And I'll tell a story later on that, which is a pretty good story.
I think I'm going to cover it from the coordinator part. So, I just went through that, interviewed with 2 different schools. And the way I look at it from a coordinator perspective is the things I'm going to take in, and I know I said only 2, but I'm going to say 3, is I take 3 things into the interview. As a coordinator, you have to be able to be the head coach of your side of the ball. You have to be able to manage coaches. You have to be able to manage players. And so I take 3 things in. One is an organization piece. What does it look like from a long-term plan? I have roles and responsibilities for each coach, whether that's pre-practice, during practice, post-practice, pre-game, during the game, post-game, like everything you can think of, just to the same way that I try to define what was expected out of our kids and players. That's what I try to do for our coaches to make their jobs easy. Because, I've been on staffs where there are coaches really frustrated that there's a few coaches that do all the work and a few coaches that don't typically pick up after the game per se. But really, I don't know if it was ever communicated on what they were supposed to, what is expected, So I think that's one thing that I can organize, and I can manage a defensive staff and defensive players.
Yeah, it's organization and communication.
Yep. 100%. Second thing I try to take in is the schematics part, because let's be honest. Most great football teams, they have a head coach who is a true face of the program and leads the program and builds the program. That's what the head coach does in big programs. Then you have the 2 dudes immediately under him who I consider the brains of the project, your coordinators. They are fluent in the new schemes or in the scheme that works best for your personnel. And they are primarily over the game plan stuff and the installation. So you have to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row for your package. I don't think you can go into a coordinator interview and just hop up on the board and say, here's my base defense. You know what I mean? I think it's a step further than that, and you need to show your package. And last, how can you help beyond the field? Like, what are the roles that you can do that technically aren't directly under your job description? So I think that's the 3 things you take in an interview.
Like, really, how can you add value beyond your title?
100%. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I get it. I think those things are really important to understand, especially in whatever interview that is. I know coordinator interviews can be certainly different for each one, but I don't think being overly organized, overly concerned about how you communicate, because I think if you're in front of someone, especially a head coach, if you're a coordinator, or if it's a principal or AD, superintendent, the one thing they're looking for, because I've been on interview panels for coaches too, or hiring coaches for other sports, the number one thing I look for is communication. Because that, if they can communicate their core values, their philosophy, whether that be X's and O's, their practice plans, if they can communicate that well, then that means that they can communicate to parents when times get tough. That means they can communicate to players when times get tough. I think those are things that are skills that you need to be able to highlight during the interview process as well.
No, I agree. No, 100%. All right. Since we're talking about this, hey man, give us your best interview story.
Oh, all right. So
what's your best one, if you had to say? And I mean, it could be best one as in didn't go great, or best one that was like the best experience. Like, what's your best?
Yeah, I'll do best
story?
Experience. That's a good one. So the best experience I had was probably my second interview for being a head coach. I'd interviewed at another school. It was kind of a typical, round table, bring your packet in. Let's kind of have a round table with like 6 or 8 people. And it went well. I was nervous at that first one. The second one was awesome. And so this one was actually at Lincolnton High School. So I'll go and give them a shout out, because I think this is an excellent way to interview. And I really think that I came away with a really good feel for who they were and what they wanted. And I think that kind of solidified in my mind that it's a really good community. But yeah, so the very first round, I think there was somewhere between 15 and 20 coaches in the first round, which is a lot that interviewed. Now, the first round was cool because you get on campus, they give you this whole itinerary. You arrive on campus, they have a person, a coach, show you the facilities. And so they take you to the weight room, they take you to the press box, a nice press box. And then by that time, they take you all the way back into this waiting room, and you're in the waiting room waiting to go in. And they tell you, prepare for a 20-minute presentation on the future of Lincoln football under your leadership. And dude, you get all jacked up. You're like, man, this is it. Because there's no questions. It's like you get in there, you put it up there and on a presentation, and you're giving it to them. And then you go in there in the auditorium and you start presenting, and it's like current players, former players, boosters from touchdown clubs and all that. You got the barber down the road, probably got the former head coach that's there. That's like, making sure everything goes well. And so it was a really cool process to go through that. And they get a sense of your personality, one, how you can communicate, right? They get a sense of like your organizational skills, and your personality overall to see if you're going to be a good fit for multiple stakeholders. So I thought that was a really cool way to do that. And I've interviewed in multiple places, and that's the only one that's ever done that. And then the second round, the final round, basically is more of that traditional round table where they're asking you really tough questions, important questions on how you would handle specific scenarios.
Yeah. Shout out to them. We'll say like hashtag relationship goals, hashtag interview goals. Like,
yeah.
That's that interview itself, it sounds like it tells you exactly how much it means and how much time and effort they put into it. So since you hit like a great experience, I'll hit an interview that was what I'll call an awkward experience. So it was a head coaching interview. I believe it might have been my first head coaching interview. I've had teacher interviews, I've had coordinator assist interviews, but my first head coaching interview, I went to the school and I walk in and they're like, we'll be with you shortly. And I'm like, okay, great. So I'm sitting there in my suit tie, by the way, for Bolton.
Did you wear tennis shoes?
I did not. I wore some Chelsea boots.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, man.
Sounds
nice
fancy. I don't know what those are, but they're fancy probably.
They came off Amazon. Not very fancy. But so then they say, all right, follow us on back. We're going to interview in the principal's office. And I'm like, great. Like, this is cool. I walk in, and I kid you not, this room may be 14 foot by 14 foot. There is a square table where there is 2, 4, 6 people sitting around the square table. You sit on one end. The principal is sitting at his desk, and there's another administrator over off in the corner sitting in a chair. And I kid you not, and some people may find it intimidating, but like I like talking to people. Like that doesn't bother me. But the thing that kind of was awkward about it is I felt like the person that was sitting to my left would exhale and I would inhale their breath. Like that's how tight and close we were. So, and like, man, like I don't have many great senses. I was blind as a bat. Luckily I got LASIK. My taste is
that
okay.
Olfactory was kicking, dude.
Dude, my hearing is not very good. But one thing I have is I have a nose like a hound dog. Yeah. And like, that's what makes me uncomfortable because I'm sitting there and I can smell all these different smells. But anyways, but also, and I think the interview shows exactly who they are, what they stand for, what they're looking for. And throughout the entire interview, I didn't feel like the questions or the experience was really genuine. Fast forward, long story short, they already had the person that they wanted to hire. And,
I could feel that.
I could feel that in the room. But no regrets. It was my first one. And, I thought it went as good as it could with the surroundings. But so I wouldn't say that's my best one, but it's definitely my most awkward one that I was a part of.
Yeah, I get it, man. No, I think interviews can go two ways. I mean, one, obviously the awkwardness. The other one, you get a good sense. The second one I really kind of want to talk about was when I actually got the job, but that interview was like 8 hours long. And so I'm not sure if this is consistent among most independent schools, but this particular school was every employee that they hire, like full-time employee, they go through the same process. And so you go in, you're meeting with multiple departments, could be like admissions, advancement, head of school for a second. Then you're going into like a parent Q&A, like in the library for an hour, and then you're rushing to eat lunch or pick up your lunch to go to a player luncheon, and you're talking with players as they ask you questions. You can't even eat because they're asking you questions, so you're answering the questions. But then you go meet with the athletic department, meet with everybody in the department. Then you go to a round table, and this is like the second round. And so it was pretty wild. And after the first round, I was like, I don't really know much about the school. It was kind of weird, private school ball. And then I was pulling up into the parking lot before that 8-hour interview. I'm like, I don't know about this. But afterwards, I had a great sense of who the school was. I think they had a really good idea of who I was because we were together all day, basically. And then, and so I think those are really, really important, but that's just not realistic for a lot of schools to undergo because they don't have the manpower and really the willingness to do it. And they did that for 4 candidates. So each candidate had a 4-day with parent Q&A and player luncheons. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, I would say one thing that I wish, in any interview, whether it's assistant, coordinator, head coach, is there was a much more transparent communication about the process. So if you're going for an assistant and coordinator job, it's a little easier because the head coach is going to probably tell you. But if you're going for a head job, like I think whoever's hiring should say, hey, here's how first round's going to go. Like this is what you can expect. Because some people are really great at thinking on their feet. Like that's their number one strength. And some people aren't bad at it, but it's not their number one thing that they're good at. So something I kind of, did when I was interviewing assistant coaches was I switched it up. Once you took the job at Kings Mountain, I became the head coach. I said, I'm going to get a little different with the interview process. So I have 12 questions that the candidate walks in. We introduce, talk for a minute, and I say, here, this is going to be a little bit different for you. Here's 12 questions. Here's a dry erase board. Here's a marker. I'm going to walk over across to the other building, and I'm going to give you 30 minutes to get your thoughts together and write down the best answer to these questions that you can think of what you would do and how you would do it. And when I come back, I'm not sitting down and you're not sitting down. We're going to stand up, and we're going to go through the information. And I think that right there, like I think, and obviously that's for an assistant job, but I think that right there brushes off the nerves that it's okay. This is something different. So they already know the number one thing about the job that they're interviewing for is we're going to think outside the box. We're going to do things differently than the traditional way to do it. And I'll be honest, doing it that way has probably benefited me, the interviewer, more than it has them, because it tells me a lot more about you versus sitting at the table, just going back and forth.
Yeah, it can be intimidating. I mean, you're on some, hiring coaches that the year that right before I left, and I'm sure it's intimidating for people to come in and sit with 2 guys just asking them questions. But I kind of like that a little bit, not to intimidate that person, but to see how they do respond in some of those. But I think that's interesting. I'd be concerned if they were like using like Grok 4 or ChatGPT, but nowadays, they still have to talk. Yeah. But they still have to talk through it, which is. But no, I think that's interesting. I think any way that you can kind of get to know them better is good, and then it probably leaves an impression on them too on how well thought out some of that stuff is. That's why those 2 places really left an impression on me because of their process. They care tremendously about who they're going to hire, which speaks a lot about them, and it's almost like a recruiting thing for them too. And sure. And so I think those are interesting for sure.
All right, I think it's time. Let's move on to the quick fire discussion.
All right.
Throw a question out there for you and give me what you think. First one, since we're talking about the interview process, what do you think the toughest interview question was for you when you were interviewing?
Ooh, I remember I was in an interview and I had my whole presentation. I told you I had my whole packet. You got core values, philosophy, practice plans, all that stuff. And the 365-day schedule, everything's maxed out. The number one question, this is superintendent in this one. And and she's obviously the one that's hiring. And she looked me dead in the face and said, and I don't think she looked up at all during the whole interview. Like I'm like crushing the questions. This is like my third or fourth one, and by this point, so I'm feeling really confident. And so she asked me. She said, "Coach, what are you gonna do when, let's say, 30% of what you plan on doing can't be done or you can't get done? Are you going to be able to adapt?" And I didn't think about that. And I remember stumbling through the answer, but I wasn't prepared for that question, because I think in my mind, this is going to go exactly like this. And I'm going to lay out the plan the way I want to, but I do need to have a way to articulate the fact that absolutely this is a plan, but it's definitely not, a static plan. This can certainly adapt to, and then have some kind of, anecdotal evidence to provide for her. But at that point, I hadn't been a head coach, so I didn't have much experience to lean on as a head coach with that one. Obviously, that was a tough one. And good for her for asking a really good question. I think was probably off the cuff, and it probably wasn't scripted for her.
Sure. Well, I mean,
ask.
I've been in, on panels where like the candidate is just rattling off all these great ideas and great answers. And like, you can tell that people are like, yeah, all this is great, but what happens when it doesn't work, or what, you know what I mean? And I think that's a tough question.
That's a hard one to answer, because especially if you don't have the anecdotal piece, the story behind, like, here's an example of me changing this, that's a tough
100%. I would say the toughest question that I experienced is, it's not really that tough of a question. I just think the way that I delivered the answer probably could have been a little bit better. It was a very base, simple question. It's the end of the game. You're walking to your vehicle, and a parent approaches you about playing time. How do you handle it? And my answer wasn't necessarily bad. It just probably wasn't the best way to answer it. And I said, well, I believe in clear communications. We have a preseason meeting where it's already, communicated. Playing time's not discussed. So I said, in theory, that parent's not going to be approaching me about playing time, just to kind of show the clear communication, which, you can argue if it's good or bad or not. But I think a better way to word it is the way that I do it, and many coaches do, is the 24-hour rule.
Yeah.
Allow emotions to calm down. We're still not going to talk about playing time, but if you would like to discuss what your player can do better to try to earn playing time, or what their role is in our program, we can totally meet. But there's two things we won't discuss: playing time and any other player on the team. We only will discuss your athlete.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. But before we go, Bolton, share that one story about that school where the guy came out and said something that was pretty funny.
Yeah. So before we go, I'll make this really quick. But I was in the interview, and I'm in the waiting room, and I'm sitting beside a fellow assistant coach. We're both interviewing for the head job at the school that we were coaching. And so I'm looking over, man, this guy's nervous, man. He's sweating bullets, and he's going before me. I'm like, hey, man, are you good? He's like, yeah, man. I was like, where'd you get your packets, man? Them things look freaking awesome. And so they're all spiral bound, full of color. I was like, how much you spend, man? It's like, man, like $300. Like, sweet, bro. Me too. I did the same thing. Look at mine. So we're like looking at each other's packets, and we're pretty close because we're on staff, but we're in there. We're like, man, this is taking a while. Anyway, guy walks out. He would end up getting the job, and a very seasoned coach, and he knew what he was doing, man. He had two young guys in there that were on his staff, or that could be on his staff, and he comes out and he looks at both of them and says, "Boys, it's real intimidating in there." So I look over, and like, he's sweating even worse, man. He's like, he's got to go in, and he goes in. I swear the interview lasted for like 12 minutes. He comes back out with all of his packets in his hand, and I said, "Dude, you didn't hand your packets out?" And he said, "Man, no, they wouldn't let me." I was like, "What do you mean they wouldn't let me?" He said, "They just said they didn't want to see him." I was like, "That ain't good sign." And so I go in there. I'm next, and I go in. I don't even let them say anything. I'm just handing out all my packets. So I made sure they got their money's worth on that. But that's one of the funnier stories that I've seen with the guy that plays the game of intimidation to the point where that kind of freaked the other guy out. But
Sure. That was a good one. That's a great story, man. That's a great story. We'll just walk in, start slinging packets because I'm getting mine handed out.
I'm getting
like,
mine in. I spent my money.
But no, guys, we appreciate y'all tuning in. This was a great episode. We hope you take something from it. Look forward to the next episode. Great guest speaker coming up, Mr. Coach Joe Salas. Really looking forward to that one. And just a reminder, Pro Quick Draw, very, very useful platform. If you would like a free trial, exclusive 14-day free trial with the affiliate link in the show notes. And we will look forward to seeing y'all soon.
See you guys.
Thanks for tuning into the Coach Speak podcast. If you're interested in being a guest speaker on the show, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at coachspeakpodcast1@gmail.com. And if you have a question for our Q&A segment, don't forget to submit it through the form in the episode description. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.